Welcome the anointed ones. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's not just a saying, it's a prophecy. And right now, an entire group is cashing in their winnings one by one like dominoes collapsing under their own weight. What's unfolding isn't random, it's patterned. Studies in human behavior show that groups built on deceit, envy, and sabotage statistically collapse faster than groups with a genuine shared purpose. Why? Because betrayal doesn't need outsiders to destroy it. It eats its own creators alive. You're about to witness that truth in real time. The very people who thought they were untouchable, who laughed the loudest while plotting in shadows, are now slipping on their own banana peels. One after another, their downfall isn't just coming, it's already happening. And the best part, you don't even have to lift a finger. You're not the executioner here. Life itself is hosting the show, and trust me, it has front-row comedy seats reserved just for you. So grab your popcorn, because this isn't your average drama. This is cosmic irony mixed with a touch of poetic justice, where every player who thought they were running the game is finally learning the oldest rule. You play, you lay. Number 1. Every player forgets the game was rigged from the start. Every player forgets the game was rigged from the start. That's the core truth they never saw coming. They thought they were clever enough, united enough, or manipulative enough to bend life to their will. But the moment they decided to play dirty against you, the outcome was already sealed. Not because you're perfect or flawless, but because certain choices come with built-in consequences. When people move with envy, deceit, and malice, they aren't writing their own script. They're locking themselves into a pre-written one, where exposure and downfall are the only possible endings. That's what makes their arrogance so ironic. They walked in thinking the odds were in their favor, convinced that the numbers, the whispers, the alliances, and the plotting would guarantee them victory. But games like these aren't decided by numbers, they're decided by alignment. They played for destruction, and destruction never rewards its players. They didn't understand that while they thought they were building a strategy, they were actually building a trap around themselves. Every lie, every scheme, every false move, another brick sealing their own fate. The deception of their thinking was this: they believed their actions were hidden, that no one would connect the dots, that they could play you and walk away untouched. But rigged games have a cruel feature. They let you feel like you're winning just long enough to blind you before everything flips. That false sense of control was their undoing. While they laughed, while they celebrated, while they thought they had you cornered, the clock was already ticking on their collapse. And now the irony is unfolding publicly. The very things they used as weapons are the very things exposing them. The conversations they whispered are resurfacing. The alliances they built are breaking apart. The false confidence they carried is being eaten alive by the truth they can't control anymore. What looked like a clever plan has turned into a trail of evidence they can't erase. The harshest part of it all is this: they thought the game was about you, but it was never really about you. It was about what their own choices set in motion. They played, and in doing so, they laid themselves down in a system that was never designed to let them win. Number 2, survival isn't about being untouched. It's about outlasting. Survival isn't about being untouched. It's about outlasting. That's the mistake this group made. They assumed that strength came from numbers, from how many people stood against you or how loudly they could shout together. But real survival has nothing to do with how big the crowd is or how much noise they make. It's about who can stand the longest when pressure doesn't let up, when the heat doesn't cool down, when the storm refuses to pass. Endurance always wins over appearance. They thought they could wear you down by coming at you as a pack. The logic was simple in their minds. If one person can't break you, maybe 5 or 10 can. But there's a hidden law they forgot. The more people you gather in negativity, the weaker the structure becomes. Groups built on envy and hate always implode faster because they're held together by temporary emotions, not real conviction. When the pressure comes, those emotions evaporate and suddenly the strong group has no backbone. Meanwhile, the one they tried to crush is still standing. Endurance isn't glamorous, and that's why they underestimated it. They mistook your ability to keep moving forward day after day as something ordinary. But survival is never ordinary when you're outlasting plots designed to erase you. You didn't need to fight loud battles to prove yourself, you just had to remain consistent. While they wasted energy watching you, competing with you, and trying to drain you, you conserved yours. That's why they're crumbling one by one. Now, their downfall is revealing itself in small but undeniable ways. Relationships that once looked strong are breaking apart. Friendships inside the group are strained because mistrust always grows where jealousy lives. The energy they once poured into targeting you is now eating them from the inside out. They can't sustain the same fire they started with, because hate doesn't fuel for long. It burns people out. And while they're running on fumes, you're still steady, moving forward with strength they can't explain. That's what outlasting really means. It's not about walking away without scars. It's about proving that even with scars, you're still here, while their entire foundation has collapsed. Survival isn't clean, but it's undeniable. You're still in the game, and they're not. Number 3. Judgment doesn't arrive like lightning, it bleeds them slowly. Judgment doesn't arrive like lightning, it bleeds them slowly. That's the part they never expected. They assumed that if something was going to happen to them, it would be instant and dramatic. A sudden exposure, a big scandal, a quick downfall. But life rarely works like that. The most devastating punishment isn't the kind that knocks you down in one moment. It's the kind that chips away at you little by little until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. That's the kind of judgment this group is walking through now. At first, nothing looked different. They were still laughing, still confident, still sure of their schemes. But over time, the small cracks started to show. The money they depended on began to dry up. The relationships they leaned on began to feel shaky. The confidence they displayed so boldly started to waver in subtle ways. It wasn't one big collapse. It was the slow unraveling of everything they thought was secure. And that's a far more terrifying reality than an overnight disaster, because they're forced to watch their own lives dissolve in slow motion. This slow bleed strips them of the one thing they always valued most: control. When judgment comes like lightning, at least you can process the hit and start over. But when it comes gradually, you never know which piece of your life will give way next. It keeps them in a constant state of anxiety. They wake up wondering what's going to fall apart today. Will it be trust, reputation, health, or stability? That's the torment of slow justice. It leaves them restless, sleepless, and powerless. The very pride that fueled their actions makes this process even harsher. They can't admit to anyone what's really happening, because admitting it would mean confessing that they were wrong all along. So they suffer in silence, trying to maintain an image that's already collapsing underneath them. What once felt like a victory now feels like a curse, because every win they claimed is turning into the evidence of their downfall. That's why this kind of judgment is so final. It doesn't just punish, it dismantles. It takes away piece by piece until nothing is left but the truth they can't escape. Their downfall wasn't sudden, it was inevitable. They aren't being struck down, they're being bled dry. Number 4. Betrayal always boomerangs. Betrayal always boomerangs. The very words they thought would vanish into darkness are now parading in the light, impossible to hide. Every whisper, every secret plot, every calculated lie they crafted to manipulate and destroy has a way of circling back, stronger and sharper than they imagined. They believed that shadows could shield them, that hidden schemes would remain invisible. But the truth has a stubborn habit of following the trail of deceit. Every blade they threw in secret, every trap they set, every attempt to undermine you is now returning with precision, striking at the foundations of their own lives. They don't see it yet, but the very energy they poured into harming you is the energy undoing them. The lies that once served as weapons are now the chains binding them, exposing their intentions to anyone willing to look. Friends, colleagues, even casual observers begin to notice the patterns, the stories that never quite add up, the inconsistencies that make the picture of their intentions undeniable. The betrayal they assumed was hidden becomes visible in the smallest ways, like cracks forming in walls that were never truly strong. It's poetic in its own harsh way. The universe doesn't need to intervene directly. It simply allows cause and effect to do its work. Every action returns in kind. Every attempt to harm you strengthens the mechanism that will unravel them. And what they once thought was clever, the manipulation, the gossip, the hidden agendas, becomes the very evidence that proves their true nature. The people they thought they could deceive are finally seeing through the mask, and there's no one left to shield them from the consequences. The lesson is brutal and undeniable. Betrayal is never one way. It carries a debt, and debts in this game are collected without mercy. They acted thinking only of the short term, failing to recognize that every lie has a life of its own. Now, each whisper, each knife in the back, each manipulation circles back, not as rumor, but as undeniable truth. Every time they look around, they are reminded that the energy they spent destroying others is the energy consuming them from within. In the end, the only surprise is that they are finally realizing it too late. Number 5. Group evil always dies by internal cannibalism. Group evil always dies by internal cannibalism. No alliance built on jealousy, envy, or destruction has any real foundation. What they thought was strength in numbers was actually weakness in disguise. Every interaction, every agreement, every handshake between them was fueled by suspicion and self-interest, not trust or genuine loyalty. Their group wasn't a team. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark, and that spark was inevitable. The moment stress, pressure, or opportunity arises, the cracks begin to show. One by one, small betrayals emerge, each one feeding the next, until the group starts to eat itself alive. Words whispered in confidence turn into accusations, loyalty turns into bargaining, and alliances formed out of convenience collapse under the weight of fear. Every member becomes a predator and prey at the same time, because when a foundation is built on envy, the only language they understand is treachery. What makes this internal collapse so brutal is that it's invisible until it's too late. Outsiders see a strong, unified front, but behind closed doors the rot is spreading faster than anyone could anticipate. They attack each other over petty slights, imagined slights, and opportunities to appear superior. Every attempt to protect oneself becomes another weapon against the group, accelerating the implosion. There's no external force needed. The poison they injected into the system flows back on them naturally, eroding cohesion until nothing is left. This is the natural law of destructive alliances. Energy spent harming others inside the group never disappears. It redirects internally, manifesting as paranoia, resentment, and sabotage. They can't sustain harmony because they never valued it. They only valued dominance and survival at another's expense. The very traits that seemed to make them dangerous in the beginning, cunning, manipulation, ruthlessness, are the traits that guarantee their own destruction. In the end, the group devours itself piece by piece. Friends become enemies, leaders become liabilities, and alliances dissolve into chaos. There's no grand finale, no dramatic showdown, just a quiet, inevitable self-destruction. What remains is the unmistakable truth. Groups built on malice cannot survive. Internal cannibalism doesn't discriminate. It destroys everyone involved, leaving only lessons for those wise enough to avoid following the same path. Number 6, you're untouchable because you never played their game. You're untouchable because you never played their game. The group kept mistaking your silence for weakness, assuming that if you weren't visibly fighting back, you were easy prey. They didn't realize that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's strategy, a shield built from patience and understanding. While they were busy moving pieces, setting traps, and trying to force reactions, you were moving in a completely different dimension, guided by alignment rather than reaction. Their rules were never your rules, and that's why none of their efforts could touch you. Every attempt they made to manipulate, intimidate, or provoke you failed, not because of luck, but because you operated on a level they couldn't even recognize. Their energy, so focused on creating chaos, was wasted against someone who refused to meet them in the battlefield they designed. You didn't chase their illusions of power or get caught up in the games they invented. You stayed steady, consistent, and true to a path that was entirely your own. The more they tried, the clearer it became that their tactics could never land. That untouchability isn't arrogance. It's a consequence of discipline and foresight. You knew that every lie, every plot, every whisper of sabotage was temporary, and that reacting to it would only trap you in their world. Instead, you invested your energy in alignment, aligning with truth, with purpose, with the natural flow of life. While they scrambled to control outcomes, you were growing stronger, more visible in ways they couldn't mimic or suppress. The irony is brutal. The harder they fought, the faster they exposed themselves, while your power only solidified quietly in the background. In the end, their collapse isn't just about their failure. It's about your immunity. You weren't invincible because you were fearless or loud. You were untouchable because you refused to enter their arena. While they spun themselves into chaos, you moved forward unscathed, rising steadily as the consequence of your restraint and focus. The game they tried to impose on you became irrelevant, and now they're left crumbling under the weight of their own strategies, while you stand completely outside it, untouchable, unshaken, and undeniably victorious. Number 7. The more they watch, the faster they rot. The more they watch, the faster they rot. Their obsession with you has become the engine of their own destruction. Every hour they spent tracking your moves, analyzing your patterns, and plotting how to corner you was an hour stolen from their own lives, from their own growth, from the responsibilities and opportunities that actually mattered. Their focus was so consumed by you that they completely lost sight of themselves, and that loss isn't subtle. It's corrosive. What they fail to see is that obsession never empowers the watcher. It destroys them. Their energy, instead of being invested in progress or purpose, is wasted on surveillance, speculation, and envy. The mind becomes a prison when it's chained to someone else's life, constantly calculating, reacting, and worrying. While they thought they were gaining an advantage, they were quietly eroding their own stability, relationships, and mental peace. Every glance toward you, every conversation about you, every assumption they made became another nail in the coffin of their clarity and control. Meanwhile, their neglect of their own path accelerates the decay. Bills pile up, responsibilities go unmet, relationships strain, and ambitions stall. They are blind to their own downfall because all their attention is glued to your existence. They're rotting from the inside, consumed by comparison, envy, and paranoia, while outwardly pretending everything is fine. The tragedy is that they don't even recognize it. The more they watch, the less they notice, until suddenly they're hollow shells of the people they thought they were. The cruelest irony is that their obsession, meant to give them power over you, has no effect on your trajectory. You continue forward, building, growing, and thriving, completely unaffected by their scrutiny. Their energy feeds nothing but their own decline, and every attempt to influence or anticipate you only tightens the spiral. In their effort to control what is not theirs, they've surrendered control over what is theirs to keep. In the end, their downfall is inevitable. They rot, not because you struck at them, not because you intervened, but because fixation consumes faster than force ever could. The more they watched you, the faster they lost themselves. And while they're trapped in obsession, your life keeps moving forward, unbothered, unstoppable, and completely free from their decay. Number 8. Masks melt under the heat of time. Masks melt under the heat of time. At first, they were flawless in their performance, charming, trustworthy, united, untouchable. Everyone believed in the image they presented because it was carefully constructed, polished, and rehearsed. But no mask, no matter how well made, can survive constant scrutiny and pressure. Time doesn't rush, and it doesn't forgive. It patiently exposes cracks, inconsistencies, and weaknesses, slowly burning away every layer of pretense until the truth underneath can no longer hide. What's terrifying for them is that the reveal doesn't need drama or confrontation. It happens quietly, naturally, through behavior, through moments they cannot control, and through the consequences of their own choices. The charming smiles start to slip. The confident tones falter. The unity they relied on for strength fractures under small pressures they never anticipated. Desperation leaks into every interaction, bitterness stains every word, and fear becomes impossible to hide. That's the heat of time. It doesn't attack externally. It works from the inside, exposing what was always there. Now the people who once believed in their carefully crafted persona see the real faces. Faces full of regret, tension, and vulnerability. The masks that convinced others to trust them, to follow them, to admire them are gone, leaving only the raw, unfiltered reality behind. What seemed solid was never truly there. It was an illusion waiting to collapse. And that collapse doesn't just affect the group. It ripples outward, revealing patterns of deception, self-interest, and fragility that were invisible when the mask was on. Time doesn't forgive performance built on lies. It doesn't care about strategy, planning, or manipulation. Its only law is that truth will surface. And as their masks melt, what remains isn't just disappointment. It's humiliation, exposure, and the undeniable proof that what they projected was never who they were. The heat of time shows everyone the people behind the performance, and once the truth is out, it can never be hidden again. Their carefully constructed image has collapsed, leaving them raw, exposed, and powerless in a way that no plot, no alliance, no scheme could ever protect them from. Number 9. Collective sin creates collective collapse. Collective sin creates collective collapse. What they built together, fueled by envy, deceit, and selfish ambition, was never sustainable. They thought that acting as a group would provide cover, that hiding behind numbers would make them untouchable. They believed that if everyone participated, no one would stand out, and their wrongdoings would be invisible. But sin, especially when shared, amplifies consequences instead of diluting them. The energy they poured into manipulation, lies, and schemes doesn't dissipate. It accumulates, forming a force that eventually crushes everyone involved. They assumed that hiding in a crowd would protect them, that being part of a collective shielded them from individual accountability. But there's a law at work stronger than any strategy they could concoct. When wrongdoing is shared, exposure becomes inevitable. One weak link, one mistake, one act of conscience among them, and the structure begins to unravel. The very alliances that seemed like strength turn into chains, binding each member to the consequences of everyone else's choices. What they thought was safety in numbers is actually a trap, and there's no escape for anyone attached. When heaven or the natural order decrees exposure, it doesn't separate the guilty. It doesn't excuse the ones who stayed in the shadows or played a smaller part. The decree hits all connected points simultaneously, dragging everyone down. The fall of one becomes the fall of all, and there's no exception. Their unity, once their perceived advantage, becomes the mechanism of their destruction. Every shared lie, every joint act of deceit, every agreement to betray or manipulate compounds until there's no way to untangle the web. The collapse is inevitable and thorough. The energy that once fueled their schemes now works against them, eroding trust, loyalty, and power from the inside. Relationships fracture, alliances crumble, and the group's cohesion disintegrates under the weight of its collective sins. In the end, Their attempt to protect themselves through numbers only ensures that no one survives unscathed. The lesson is absolute. When wrongdoing is shared, accountability is shared, and the collapse is collective, leaving no one untouched by the consequences of their own and each other's choices. Number 10. Their loss feels personal because their entire identity was built on you. Their loss feels personal because their entire identity was built on you. They weren't fighting for achievement, recognition, or progress. They were fighting for your failure, measuring their value against your struggles, hoping that your downfall would elevate them. Every strategy, every plot, every whisper behind your back wasn't about creating something of their own. It was about proving they could break you. Your existence became their yardstick, the standard by which they gauged their worth. Without your collapse, all of that effort becomes meaningless. And that's where the pain begins. They invested so much of themselves in your defeat that survival isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's existential. Your ability to endure, to rise above their schemes, and to continue on your path shatters the foundation they built around their identity. Suddenly, the stories they told themselves about power, control, and superiority start to crumble. They realize that every boast, every manipulation, every carefully crafted act of sabotage was never about strength. It was about control over you, and control was never theirs to hold. The deeper tragedy for them is that this collapse is undeniable. Their sense of self was intertwined with the idea that you would fail. Now that you haven't, every mirror they look into reflects someone smaller than they thought, someone dependent on someone else's weakness to feel significant. The fear, the bitterness, the envy that drove them is now feeding itself, creating a cycle of frustration and confusion that they can't escape. They are left questioning who they are when their entire persona was built on something that never existed outside of your struggles. Meanwhile, you move forward, untouched by the weight of their obsession. Your survival doesn't require confrontation or proof. It simply exists, and that is enough to dismantle everything they thought defined them. The irony is brutal. The more they tried to destroy you, the more they exposed themselves, and now their identity, built entirely on your presumed failure, is collapsing in real time. Every attempt to regain a sense of power only reminds them of what they lack, making your presence the invisible executioner of their own undoing. Number 11. Power without morality always self-destructs. Power without morality always self-destructs. They might have had influence, numbers, wealth, and status, but none of it had a foundation. They built their power on manipulation, lies, and selfish ambition, assuming that control over others was the same as real strength. What they failed to understand is that power without integrity is not power at all. It's a slow-acting poison. The higher they climbed, the more the corruption inside them festered, turning their victories into hollow triumphs and their achievements into traps they couldn't escape. Every step they took to dominate or manipulate became another step in their own undoing. Deals made without conscience, alliances formed for convenience, and victories achieved at the expense of others carried a hidden cost: their own destruction. The influence they wielded so confidently was built on unstable ground, and the weight of their own misdeeds gradually pulled them under. It wasn't external forces that were dismantling them. It was the disease inside their own character. Even when they succeeded, the success came with rot baked into it. Every reward, every title, every recognition was poisoned because it was gained without fairness, honesty, or ethics. They couldn't enjoy what they thought they earned because the very acts that created it were tearing them apart from the inside. Their pride blinded them to the decay until it was too late, and the higher they rose, the more evident it became to everyone around them that their victories carried no true power, only the consequences of moral bankruptcy. The collapse is inevitable because integrity is the only invisible armor strong enough to sustain real influence. Without it, even the most impressive empires crumble, because power alone can't defend against decay within. What looked like unstoppable success is actually a countdown to exposure and failure. Every moment they relied on manipulation instead of principle, they accelerated their own self-destruction. In the end, they discover the hardest truth. Power without morality doesn't just fail. It consumes the person who wields it. Their authority, influence, and victories were never secure, because they lacked the one thing that turns strength into legacy: integrity. The disease they ignored finally devours them, leaving nothing behind but a cautionary tale of what happens when power is divorced from conscience. Number 12. Exposure isn't loud, it's inevitable. Exposure isn't loud, it's inevitable. They believed that if they buried the truth deep enough, if they controlled the narrative tightly, no one would ever see what they had done. They imagined that secrets could remain hidden forever, that lies could replace reality, and that the world would never notice the cracks forming beneath their carefully constructed image. But truth has a way of surfacing, not with a bang, but with a slow, relentless certainty that no amount of manipulation can stop. It doesn't need a stage, microphones, or headlines to reveal itself. Exposure works quietly, almost invisibly. It comes in patterns that repeat too often to ignore, in conversations that accidentally leak what was meant to be concealed, and in behaviors that contradict the stories they've told. Small inconsistencies, once overlooked, accumulate until they form a complete picture that is undeniable. What was once secret becomes obvious, and by the time they realize it, everyone else already knows. The irony is brutal. Their attempts to control perception only accelerate the process. By obsessing over cover-ups, creating alibis, and manipulating appearances, they generate the very evidence that exposes them. Lies that were meant to hide the truth become the markers of it, and every attempt to explain, excuse, or redirect attention only tightens the circle around them. The world doesn't need to be told. It begins to see patterns, recognize repeated behaviors, and connect dots that they assumed would never be connected. And while they scramble to regain control, the exposure continues quietly but relentlessly. Friends, colleagues, and observers begin to understand the reality of what happened, sometimes without a single word from you. The truth emerges naturally, like water finding its way through cracks, and by the time they understand that the walls are crumbling, it's too late. The beauty and terror of exposure is that it's impartial and inevitable. It doesn't matter how clever they were, how carefully they plotted, or how much energy they spent hiding their actions. The truth always finds its way out. And when it does, it doesn't just reveal them. It leaves them powerless. While the reality they tried to erase stands unshakable, undeniable, and absolute. Number 13. You became the mirror. They can't escape. You became the mirror they can't escape. Every glance at you, every mention of your name, every memory of your presence forces them to confront themselves in ways they never wanted. They see what they have done, the lies they told, the betrayals they orchestrated, and the ways they allowed greed, envy, and cruelty to define them. You don't need to act, speak, or retaliate. Your very existence reflects back the truth of their corruption with a clarity they can't ignore. This is why they feel so uncomfortable around you. It isn't about fear of confrontation or revenge. It's about an internal reckoning they are incapable of facing. You embody the contrast between what they pretended to be and what they really are. Every time they observe your calm, your progress, or your unshakable presence, they are reminded of the emptiness of their own efforts. Their attempts to diminish you, manipulate reality, or rewrite history fail because you are living proof that their strategies were never effective. The mirror effect is relentless. They can't hide from it, and the more they try, the more it stings. They start noticing the ways in which their own decisions backfired, how alliances cracked, how reputations crumbled, and how you remained untouched by the chaos they created. Your success, stability, and clarity become the measure of everything they lost or never had. They don't even need anyone to point it out. The reflection is unavoidable. This is what makes your presence so unbearable to them. You are the constant reminder that their actions have consequences, and that nothing they built on deception or malice could ever last. You don't need to prove anything, and you don't need to strike. They are already witnessing the results of their own choices through you. Every interaction, every observation, every fleeting thought about you forces them to face the reality they tried to escape, and that realization alone carries a weight they cannot bear. In essence, you are not just surviving. You are a living indictment of their failures. Your very being exposes what they try to hide, holding up a mirror they cannot turn away from, and leaving them powerless to escape the truth of who they really are. Number 14. Divine justice doesn't miss. It just waits for the perfect timing. Divine justice doesn't miss. It just waits for the perfect timing. They assumed that silence, delay, or distance could protect them, that if no one noticed immediately, the consequences would never come. They believed that time was on their side, that every lie, betrayal, or scheme could slip quietly into the shadows. But timing is the true weapon of divine justice, precise and patient, biding its moment until every falsehood is fully exposed, every mask has fallen, and the world can no longer ignore the truth. What makes this form of justice unstoppable is that it doesn't act hastily. It observes, it waits. It allows every action, every decision, and every misstep to play itself out fully. They may celebrate temporary victories or enjoy fleeting control, but each one of those moments is merely setting the stage for the ultimate reveal. The perfection of timing ensures that when justice arrives, it is undeniable. Every witness, every participant, every observer sees it clearly, and there's no room for manipulation, excuses, or escape. They cannot speed it up, stop it, or bargain with it. The delay they mistook for mercy is actually the instrument that makes the consequences most inescapable. By waiting, divine justice ensures that every lie, every betrayal, and every hidden act comes into full view. The audience sees the unmasking, the patterns align, and the truth becomes impossible to deny. Their carefully constructed illusions crumble because the timing is orchestrated so perfectly that even their desperation cannot alter the outcome. In this way, silence and delay are not safety, they are exposure incubators. Every second they wait, every plot they hatch, every attempt to avoid accountability is being recorded in the natural order. And when the moment arrives, it is so complete, so absolute, and so precise that nothing can shift the impact. There are no coincidences, no accidents, no second chances. Ultimately, divine justice strikes not out of anger or haste, but out of perfect calculation. It waits until every weakness is visible, every truth undeniable, and every audience fully attentive. When it moves, it leaves no doubt, no loophole, and no escape. And in that strike, the reality of what really happened is revealed in a way that they cannot deny, challenge, or avoid, proving that justice never misses. It simply chooses the moment when the lesson hits hardest. The story isn't just about conflict, it's about inevitability. Every move, every whisper, every scheme, and every attempt to manipulate was destined to circle back, not because of chance, but because truth, alignment, and justice operate on a level far beyond human calculation. They thought they controlled the game, that numbers, power, and cunning could shield them from consequences. What they didn't realize is that their own choices were the architects of their downfall, and while they scrambled in desperation, the path of inevitability carried forward without pause. Every act of betrayal they unleashed returned to them sharper than they expected. Every alliance built on envy, manipulation, or deceit dissolved from within. The masks they wore melted under the heat of time, exposing the hollow, desperate realities behind the facades. And while they focused all their energy on controlling you, on observing and undermining, they lost themselves, their identities, their purpose, and their strength corroded from the inside out. Meanwhile, you moved forward, untouchable, aligned and unshaken, a living reflection of integrity and survival. This isn't luck, it isn't coincidence, and it isn't even revenge. It's the undeniable law of alignment, cause and effect, and divine timing. The energy they poured into destruction became the force that dismantled them. The very presence of truth, your presence, held a mirror they could not escape, forcing them to confront themselves in ways they never wanted to see. And when divine justice arrived, perfectly timed and unavoidable, it exposed every lie, every betrayal, and every hollow victory in plain sight, leaving them powerless to rewrite history. In the end, this isn't a story of chaos. It's a story of inevitability and exposure. Their collapse was never about you being strong or them being weak. It was about truth being inevitable, justice being patient, and integrity outlasting manipulation. You didn't need to fight, you didn't need to act, and you didn't need to prove a thing. Your existence, your alignment, and your survival spoke louder than any plot, any lie, or any scheme ever could. They played, they tried, they failed, and the world witnessed it, one undeniable moment at a time. If this content hit home, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and share it with anyone who needs to see the truth. Your support helps spread these powerful insights and keeps the conversation alive. So hit all those buttons and let the world witness the story unfold. God bless you.